Piece number 15, Perception. Grandfather always reminded me that my reality is something that I create. The mind controls every view that enters our consciousness. Its filters must be so realigned as to view life through a prism that is positive and inviting. I often remind myself that the world I create is of my own doing. If I want to live a life of positive consciousness, I can. If I want to live one of dispirited failure, I also can. I possess free will. That being said, I am always tempted by my curious imagination. The violent events that are unfolding in Europe have made me wonder what it was like to live in a late 19th century reality. Was it better? Many claim it was a more peaceful place, the pinnacle of worldwide culture and excellence. We have always had an attraction to the past, a romanticized view of yesteryear. The important devices that we take for granted today, of course, had just begun to exist. These include the modern car, credited to Carl Benz in 1886, the telephone, patented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, and the airplane, the 1903 flight by the Wright brothers, is considered the first successful aerial trip. We often seek to solve contemporary concerns through historical lessons. From a modern perspective, has this previous time, in fact, been honestly represented? Was it superior to our modern era? Certainly, for the upper classes, things were much, much better. Firstly, your schooling was vastly superior to the average person's. Secondly, your chances for advancement in both the military and in the government bureaucracy were outstanding. Highly educated men, always men, were posted all over the world. It was a time of great adventure. However, though wars were not brought home, they were fought. One of the most telling was the destruction of an entire British army in Afghanistan in 1842. The empire, in its hubris, though not yet an empire, the creation of the British Raj after the Indian Mutiny only occurred in 1857, believed that it could pacify the savages by simply marching out and occupying Kabul. This it did in 1839 without any major incident. In spite of these accomplishments, by the end of 1841, the isolated troops were tired and dispirited. The local population was, quite understandably, hostile and unwelcoming. It was, therefore, decided to withdraw. On January 1st, 1842, the commander, Major General Elphinstone, reached an agreement of safe passage with the local Afghan elders. The British and additional Indian forces, which included both military and civilian personnel, numbered around 16,500. It was, unfortunately, the very middle of a bitterly cold season, and the unpopulated and dangerous mountain passes could only invite disaster. The other tribes had not been informed of the treaty. They, thus, soon began to snipe at the fleeing columns. This, the winter conditions and the poor morale, soon produced a full-blown rout. Men scrambled to survive, all to no avail. The troops and camp followers had no shelter and little food or weapons. The army was soon wiped out. The only soldier to initially reach Jalalabad was Dr. William Brydon. His horse died under him upon arrival. Major General Elphinstone died in captivity. The civilized world was stunned. If we now return to our century, we see that we have learned only a few lessons from history. The return of the West to Afghanistan and then to Iraq has done nothing but ignite a witch's brew of murder and mayhem. The documentaries Blood and Oil and Enemy of Enemies. The rise of ISIL clearly show that the gauntlet of responsibility must be thrown at the feet of the dominant world powers. The people that claim loyalty to the Islamic State are clearly not psychopaths, as the American Secretary of State has stated. They are deeply religious protectors of their faith, as they see it. I may vehemently disagree with their methods, which I do, but their ideas will never be expunged or altered by brute force. It is incumbent on us to change the reality that they occupy. This can only be done through dialogue and social media. I am sure that there are some hardcore fanatics, as there are with any group or movement. These can only be emasculated through real discourse. It may be perceived as a naive view, but I believe that human beings are intrinsically kind and loving beings. They are, in spite of this, easily offended and frightened. Most fear their own mortality, having very little understanding of death and its transition. It is thus easy to adopt views that offer simplistic and permanent solutions. Immortality of the ego, for instance. Every human being desires dignity and value. How each of us responds, possessing the power of one, will dictate the values of our world family. Director, playwright, and author Alejandro Jodorowsky has a thought. Let the inner God that is in each one of us speak. The temple is your body, and the priest is your heart. It is from here that every awareness must begin.